When I was 25 and a half, I started a podcast. The goal? To review some of the newest and latest movies, along with some other stuff. With the help of my guests, I was able to do this, but there were dark forces tampering with my podcast, and with me. They called it an improvised podcast for some reason. I eventually found help in the form of myself. Yes, the me from a universe where the movies I reviewed got delayed. Apparently, my podcast made it to his universe. I know now that it is my duty, for the good of that universe, nay, the multiverse, to keep recapping and reviewing these movies, to hold listeners over until they could eventually see the movies as they were made in their world. For some reason, they come out differently in my world, but it's kind of entertaining that way. My name is Steven Schinder, and this is Delayed Replay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Season 2 premiere of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we review/recap some of the latest movies, or maybe they're weeks old or months old, as is the case of this one. This one being the Kingsman, which came out September of last year. You know, people in that other universe still haven't seen it yet, so we figured we'd help by trying to hold them over, even if the movie being different in our universe than in their universe. I'm Steven Schinder, your host as always. Joining me on this episode is a few buddies from Sussex, Sci-Fi, and Horror Society. I actually studied abroad at University of Sussex back in autumn 2017, and the me of the other universe told me that he's gotten to know them more on Discord, and so figured I'd connect with them here and we could talk about this movie. So first up, we have Ted Richardson, also known as Gitbag the Great. How are you doing, Ted?
I'm doing marvellously well. I made some rather nice steak medallions earlier today with some pan-seared asparagus, broccoli, and cheddar mash. Generally, I'm known as kind of like the surly, alcohol-swilling enforcer of the Sussex Sci-Fi and Horror Society, and I generally have a bit of a penchant for quite cheesy B-movies that kind of sort of just feel that sort of cheeseburger entertainment itch. I think I first went to the Society viewing in late 2017, probably around the same time as you did, Stephen. And I've been doing written film reviews since 2011, and I've been doing like gaming videos on YouTube since probably early 2014. But yeah, generally my taste in films tend to centre around action, sci-fi, and horror. And that's basically all that everyone needs to know about me before they find out about the horrendous skeletons in my cupboard.
That's not me, is it?
Oh, no. There's at least a couple dozen more in there. Don't worry.
Yeah, and that other voice you just heard is the president of the society. It is Greg.
Hello, my greedy little fellows.
But you can just hear and feel his fingers waggle.
Yeah. All right.
Ow! That was a line from the best British TV show, Top Gear, which I recommend all of you watch for you.
Yeah, I need to check out Top Gear at some point. I guess.
Do not watch the new ones. Anything since Hammond left, Richard.
Jeremy Clarkson, James May, and Richard Hammond.
Yeah, ever since they left, it's horrid. So, just watch the earlier ones, it'd be good.
Alright, yeah, we got some Top Gear elitists here, I guess, so I'll keep that in mind. And that last voice you heard, I already forget what your position is in this society, but it is James McCary.
Hello, I'm the Vice President of the Society and the Welfare Officer.
He's the bum of all the jokes.
No, to be honest with you, Greg, I think that's you, because you call yourself El Presidente and you burp constantly whenever you have viewings, so it's like you're the one who gets joked at.
You dare criticise my leadership?
Yeah, because you basically run the society as a sort of ad hoc military junta. It's like
Because I can,
you're there
and I
to.
will.
Right. So yeah, we're talking about The Kingsman, a prequel to the other two films, The Secret Service and Golden Circle, all of which are like somewhat based on a comic book, apparently, and directed by Matthew Vaughn, who worked on Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class. So yeah, there's a bit of a through line with his work, I guess. But we'll go around the horn with our impressions on the movies that came out before this one. So, Ted, what were your impressions with Kingsman 1 and 2?
I think they both kind of could be sort of categorized as sort of cheeseburger, popcorn, blockbuster action flicks, because they're both inherently ridiculous and mad as a box of drunken badgers. But they're both enjoyable on a basic level. However, I would say that the first one is generally better, both in terms of its subjective enjoyment levels and also in terms of its objective filmmaking, because the motivations and the plots of the main villains in each film are mad. But in the first one, there's at least some kind of believability to the behavior of the main villain played by Samuel L. Jackson. And while the plot he has is kind of ridiculous and wouldn't really work in a real world sort of setting, at least at the time that the film was released, he does behave in a way that is somewhat believable to a slightly cartoony action movie villain. However, while a lot of the similar themes of like ridiculous spectacle action are similar and represented in the second film, and the second film has very much a sort of through line that's based off of ripping into real world politics, at least in the context of when that film was released. I feel like I enjoy the second film less because the writing generally isn't as good. The plot moves around a bit more of a sluggish place and is kind of all over the place. Plus, the plot of the villain makes even less sense than in the first film and is really like stretched out. So it's hard to. I mean, I'd say the first film for me is like a 7 out of 10. You'll enjoy it, and it's above the average of like the action films that were being released at the time. But the second film, it's like a 5 out of 10. It's like just put it on the background in a party when you're all playing beer pong and getting drunk. So that's my feelings towards the films, generally speaking.
All right, what about you, James?
I didn't see the first movie when it came out in the cinemas, but a friend recommended that we watched it together, and I absolutely loved it. I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy it, but the kind of crazy comedy that it went about was the sort that I really enjoyed. I especially enjoyed all the jabs against James Bond, because I really love James Bond, but at the same time I understand how stupid parts of it is, and all the pickings of that were just perfect. I then went to see the second movie in the cinema, and I mean, it was good, but it wasn't as fantastic as the first movie. I mean, it just felt like they couldn't quite capture the sparkle that the first movie had. I felt like it was a bit too unsubtle in ways, and I just didn't deal with the characters and emphasize them as much as I emphasized with the first set of characters. But it was still an enjoyable movie, and definitely one that you could just watch, not really pay attention to and enjoy, but I'd still definitely prefer watching the first film over the second.
Nice. What about you, Greg?
The main parts of these films that I like the most has to be the cameos, because they are just otherworldly. Is just how I can say that.
Especially Elton John in the second film, where it's just like it feels like every scene he's in is a fever dream, but you can definitely tell he's just having a great time and he's just having fun.
Oh yeah, just strutting around in his
just struggling
in chicken suit.
In that fabulous sequin sort of like suit, and then fighting robotic dogs. It's mad as badgers, but you can tell he's having a great time.
Well.
Yeah, he's fighting off some dog soldiers, right?
The scene in the glass box when he just tells that nurse to just fuck off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fuck off. Fuck off.
Fuck off. Fuck off.
You can definitely tell it's sort of like funny because I feel like in that scene, like they're not even like filming a film there. He was just genuinely annoyed because like
Yeah, I wanted to know if that was scripted or not.
yeah, they probably just didn't serve him like his daily Earl Grey tea, and he got really mad. He just flipped out. And they thought, "Oh, this is crazy good. We should record this."
Yeah, and I mean, Taron Egerton went on to play Elton John in Rocketman, which I thought was actually really good.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah. And yeah, we also had like Mark Hamill in the first movie. That was kind of weird, right? It was like before he made his Star Wars return, like a year or several months.
Oh yeah, I forgot
Really?
about
The first one?
Yeah,
I
he
remember
played
being
that
in the first one.
professor. who
No,
got-
'cause
yeah, he
the
played
first one came out in
professor.
2014, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it came out December 2014.
About a year.
Over in England, and maybe early 2015 over here.
Came out.
Let me just double check that.
I mean, I remember the Star Wars Episode 7 came out late 2015.
Yeah, the first one came out
Yeah.
13th of December 2014,
Yeah.
and then it came out
It's
theatrically.
something called But Numb-a-thon.
What is that?
is.
Because I remember I went to see the first Kingsman film at the cinema with my mum, and it was weirdly enough, actually, I felt like even though I went to see that film with someone else, with my mum, who has very different tastes in films, and yet I went to see the second film at the cinema on my own. I feel like I had a more enjoyable viewing experience with the first one because it was generally a better made film.
Well, I saw the first, I think in 2015, like after it was on like home video. I watched it with me. Of course, I watched it with me. I watched it with my brother and our friends. And we just loved how absolutely bonkers and colorful it got with like the exploding heads and stuff like that. And it was just well acted, well made all around. And at the end of it, my brother was like, "They're gonna make a second one," and one of our friends was like, "No, they're gonna ruin it." And while I do think, so the Golden Circle I watched about a year ago. While I do think I enjoyed it more than the average person, I still think it pales in comparison to the first movie, which I sort of expected anyway, because it was tough to recapture the magic of the first movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of much the way I feel about the third Terminator film, because even though I enjoy that, it just doesn't even come close to like the legacy of the first and second Terminator films, and maybe that's like a matter of circumstance, or like when it was released, or just the fact that it had so much to live up to. And I feel like that probably did happen a lot with the Golden Circle as well, to be fair. So I don't think it's the less positive reception is entirely its fault, in all fairness.
My circumstances with the Terminator movies is kind of weird because when I was like maybe 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there, I watched, or maybe 9, I don't know. So as a kid, I guess you could say, Terminator 3 was the first Terminator movie I watched, I believe, and I remember loving the speech at the end from John Connor. I still think it's a great speech, but you know, there's no denying that like Terminator 3, Genesis, and Dark Fate are basically trying to repeat like the first and second movies. Salvation tried doing something different, and I liked that, but it didn't resonate as well with many people.
I do respect what Salvation tried to do. I just don't respect the fact that it is about as interesting as watching snails race, or listening to or watching an episode of Songs of Praise. So I just can't get into that one, to be honest.
Right, that's fair. So yeah, this new one is called The Kingsman, and it's a prequel set in World War One. It's actually the first Kingsman movie I watched in the theater. So that was fun. So what do you guys think of like this approach of like taking in some like historical figures and portraying them with like these sorts of actors and in this kind of over the top manner.
Oh god, I mean, like, I have a very particular view on it because I've studied history for a long time. I focused a lot on history during my GCSEs. I did history at A-level. I did history and politics my undergrad, and then also contemporary history for my masters. So in my opinion, if you're going to do history, you have to really clearly differentiate between whether or not it's historical fiction or it's a historical biopic. Like, for example, I don't like the film 1492 Conquest of Paradise because it is based off of real events, but it dramatizes and alters so many points of history that it may as well be fiction, quite honestly, and it glosses over quite a great deal of the really demonstrable and downright evil things that Christopher Columbus did when he, in quotation marks, discovered America. Even though the Vikings did so 500 years earlier, but I would say, in terms of this film, in terms of The King's Man, I don't have any problems with historical figures and historical events being treated in a sort of semi-fictional way, because you can clearly tell from the framing of the film, even without them necessarily stating that it is historical fiction, that it is historical fiction. And as a result, I can sort of slightly turn off my historical nitpicking brain a little bit. But like, the one thing I would add on to that is, like, I don't mind it being historical fiction, and I don't mind them playing around with the concepts of history within a fictional context and a fictional story. What I would ask is that it's generally respectful to the story and the history that it is based on, and that it is generally believable to the events that happened in terms of the history that it's based on. But generally speaking, I don't have a problem with the way that films like this use the history it's based on, just as long as it is believable and broadly accurate.
Right, because we were kind of talking about the Inglourious Bastards comparison, where they kind of have a bit of leeway just because going in, it's kind of over the top. And like, Daniel Brohl is even in both films, which is like, he plays Eric Jan Hannison.
Inglourious Bastards is like such a bonkers film. It's like mad as like a bunch of drugged up frogs in a shoe case, but it's and so like that, without even, again, that's another example of a film without even saying it's fiction. You can clearly tell that it is historical fiction. And that's in large part because of the tone of just how bonkers it is. So yeah.
Yeah, and we also got Tom Hollander, not to be confused with Tom Holland, playing George V, Wilhelm II, and Nicholas II, who are all cousins, apparently. It's kind of like a Kevin Smith view as universe thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a really good idea, because obviously one of the big things about World War I was that it was a family affair. And if you look at historical pictures, they do look very alike. Like, I've heard that at least two of them routinely were mistaken for each other. So I think that's a really clever way that Vince Vaughn used to show just how similar these warring families were. And I think Tom Hollander was the perfect choice for it. He did a really good job.
Did you say Vince Vaughn?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Matthew Vaughn.
Bit of a difference.
I'm leaving that in.
Oh, no.
But yeah, that was kind of the joke that he was making. And I mean, family affairs and war, that's a Star Wars movie in the making, Someone mentioned James Bond earlier. Like, the Kingsman movies very obviously play on the tropes of like James Bond movies. And we actually have a Bond connection in this prequel. We have Ralph Fiennes playing the Duke of Oxford. He played M in some of the like recent Bond films, and Matthew Vaughn has even said he would have made a great James Bond like 20 years ago or something. But what did you guys think of Ralph Fiennes in this movie? I guess we'll start with Greg.
So Ralph Fiennes, obviously, he knows how to how to act. And this man is a Kingsman, and he can act. He was very good in this movie, and I feel that he took like parts of Voldemort, and he was just
Yeah, I forgot he was Voldemort.
he took parts of Voldemort, and if you've seen the Hannibal movies, he took part of the
On Red Dragon.
he took some Red Dragon in there as well, and it's just astonishing work by him.
I don't know why, when you said he took some Red Dragon in there, it sounded like he was inserting in some energy drink into like a cocktail or something, like some knockoff brand of Red Bull or something.
Yeah.
To me, it sounded like Red Dragon was like the name of some sort of drug.
But to be fair, this was like, I mean, in the setting of this film, this is like in the early 1910s, around the time of the First World War. So this is pretty much around the time when like doctors were prescribing like opium and cocaine to their patients for things like, I don't know, like ghosts in their blood or like aspirations in their eyeballs or some cobblers. So it's probably not too far of a stretch to make that reference.
Yeah. I mean, Ralph Fiennes, he just oozes British class, and he does that perfectly in this movie. It's just a perfect role, and like you said, I think the character the sort of Britishness that he used as M really comes off here, but then also he does use some of his more fun characters from other movies as sort of basis, and just it works so well.
It does help that he uses the K, which obviously goes back to him being Voldemort. So I feel like they definitely wanted to go him using the cane as a wand, perhaps.
It would have been so great though if he tried to shoot a spell from the end of his cane, and then he just halfway through his line he goes, "Damn, wrong franchise." I
followed a bit from the second movie with the briefcase.
Oh god, yeah. I really liked his performance in this film. I thought I did see what Greg and James mentioned in terms of him being sort of like a fun character and bringing some of the aspects of his more light-hearted characters from other films into this movie. But what I got more of an impression of was the fact that he was kind of a hard man who was like this pressured aristocrat who was kind of like really pressured to do the right thing but at a great cost. But you could deep down inside still see that he had some like real tangible sense of like morals and like wanted to do the right thing in the right way. So he was kind of like, he felt like a very sympathetic character to me too. He was kind of like pressed to do some quite sort of hard things to do. So I felt, while I couldn't sort of like connect with this character on the level of him being like an aristocrat, I felt like I could connect with him on a personal level in terms of the actions he was doing. So I felt like it was a very compelling role, to be honest.
It's really cool that he has a cane that has like a sword in it. And they do kind of shake up that dynamic by making like, the main young protagonist, his own son, Conrad, played by Harris Dickinson. So like this movie begins with like this insane like World War I stuff. Like basically we get like a recap of everything that's going on, like the assassination attempts on Franz Ferdinand, and then the stuff in the trenches, and Conrad and a friend of his like have to go behind enemy lines, and then he has to save him. But like, what you guys think of the way Conrad was introduced?
It was definitely interesting, I feel, and I think introducing him, you had to be careful because it would be quite difficult, and I think a lot of people would compare him to Eggsy from the first movie. So I think they did a good attempt at trying to create a different character to him, and it didn't just feel like a copy and paste.
Right. What about you, Greg? What did you think?
If you've seen the film 1917, I got that kind of...
I haven't.
Oh.
You can't just reference every World War I film to 1917.
No, it's just because of how he had to save his friend. Because obviously that happened in 1917. It was absolutely brutal what that guy had to go through in 1917. And I feel like what happened to Conrad, it builds up the character that he has. Like Eggsy, he didn't have to Yes, he had hardships, obviously,
I mean, yeah,
with the training, but obviously
he's a working class lad from like a very rough council estate in London, so he's kind of got society working against him from the offset. But I even though Conrad was kind of from a very obviously like upper middle class background, you felt like he came into like this adventure with like this sort of like wide, fresh-faced innocence and the willingness to do what needed to be done to save the world alongside his dad. And because his dad already had this hard edge, you knew that he was kind of like the kind of character who could undertake such things. But I kind of sort of like had slight, and it was a bit of a mother hen sort of attitude where I sort of kind of felt a bit worried about Conrad because I was thinking, oh God, can he manage this? And he, I don't usually really like sort of young sort of sidekick characters, but he was strangely compelling. And in terms of his own journey and his relationship with his father, I thought if it was one character on their own, they would have both been fairly effective, but I think combined together they made something far greater than the sum of their parts. And they created quite a good central emotional journey throughout the film.
Yeah, and we even get these like this whole training thing at the mansion. So again, like those X-Men First Class type of vibes. And he does like this knife fighting with Shola, who is his dad's right-hand man, and he's played by Jimon Hansu, who weirdly was in A Quiet Place Part 2, which was like the season 1 premiere topic of this podcast. Like, I did not intend that, but yeah.
Quiet Place.
I mean, the first Quiet Place was very good.
It really wasn't.
I've yet to see that movie.
I liked it.
It was nothing.
So
it was the quintessential.
You like every movie, Greg.
It was the quintessential example of a concept film. It was just popular based off of the concept that it had, and then when you actually look at it with a critical eye, it just falls apart.
You just don't get it.
I do get it. It's just not very good, and that's a shitty response.
It's like a Joker. Nothing you wouldn't get.
You wouldn't get it morally.
Right, but yeah, I thought the training sequence with the knife was pretty cool. I do think it went on a bit longer than it needed to, like 10 minutes of knife fight training. But what did you guys think?
I agree. Like the fighting was incredible at the beginning. Like all of the Kingsman fight scenes are just wonderful and very well choreographed with a great editing style. But sometimes he can get a bit too wrapped up in the amazingness of it. And yeah, I think you're right. I think it did begin to show. But I think it was able to get its point across of the ability that these people are fighting at. But yeah, a bit more editing would have done the trick.
Training montages are a really difficult thing to get right because it also kind of depends on the kind of film you're making. Like, if it's like a martial arts film, then I kind of feel like having one is kind of obligatory. But like usually I would say like the prime timescale for like a really good training montage is probably like somewhere between like 50 seconds to like a minute and a half. Even then, usually go on the shorter side of that spectrum. The best example I think of like a really good inspirational training montage that's a little bit cheesy, but it's just got just the right amount of like genuine inspiration is in it's probably in either Kickboxer or Bloodsport, which are two very, very Jean-Claude Van Damme centric sort of films that really play to like the strengths of his earlier career. Which I would recommend both of them because they're both bonkers but also quite fun. But yeah, I feel like this one probably overran its course by about probably 30-40 seconds. It felt like it served its purpose, but just it kind of similar to the entirety of the second film. It just dragged on about 20% too long, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, with 80s movies that have training montages, you kind of need like the cheesy 80s.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like in the one for Bloodsport, for example, like there's just like so much cheesy synth and like Jean-Claude Van Damme's like youthful muscles like rippling in like the Southeast Asian sun, and you're just like, oh yeah, this just makes you want to gap and just like. eat a steak and then punch a tree in half or something. It's fantastic. It's really, really great.
Just eat a tree and cut a steak in half.
Eat half a forest and then cut a steak in half by looking at it.
We do have like badass characters in this movie, as is par for the course for Kingsman. One of them is Polly, played by Gemma Arterton,
who I might have ever since the Clash of the Titans remake, I have had a massive crush on, to be honest.
Oh geez, I forgot.
It's I'll be honest, it's not as great as the original from the 80s, but it's decent enough. But I saw her in that film and I just fell in love with her. I've got such a schoolboy crush on her, to be honest. I think Rosa Pike was in the second film, actually.
Rosamund Pike.
Yeah, Rosamund Pike, sorry. And she's just like, it's weird because she actually does a good performance in that film, but she just feels weirdly out of place. It's really odd.
I think she acts well, but her character wasn't well developed and sort of just existed. No,
which is annoying because she always turns out like a 7 out of 10 performance in every one of her films. So it's like, it does feel like she was a bit wasted in that one, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree. I felt like Gemma Arterton's role in The King's Man was kind of like Mary Poppins by the way of Lara Croft to the power of Lady from the Devil May Cry series. She had like sort of different aspects to her that you would initially think wouldn't really work, but she weirdly made it kind of sort of work. I think like her performance felt a bit one note at points, but generally she felt like Mary Poppins on steroids at points, which I thought was really funny, and I actually genuinely really enjoyed, despite how mad her character was.
She even has the umbrella with the gun in it, which is just a lot of fun.
That's just fantastic. Yeah, such a great performance, and yeah, I really enjoyed it as well. Just sort of the over-topness of her character, sort of like, and I think it just did really well. And I think that's something that Vaughan does really well, is producing over-the-top characters who are just the right amount of over the top. Like you don't at all think, oh, this is just utterly ridiculous, but you know that every scene they're in is going to be crazy.
Yeah, at least she was not a Ray. I was happy about that.
Oh, okay. Let's not get Greg started on that topic.
Oh yeah, Greg isn't the biggest Ray fan. So, agree to disagree on my part.
Let's just get out of that area, because it's basically like going to a rave during a pandemic.
Yeah, that other universe is unfortunately dealing with a pandemic.
Yeah, and they're dealing with it like they're dealing with it in the same way where someone would think that the best way to deal with a dirty laptop would be to rinse it in water. So yeah, they're not doing it in the best way, to be honest. Let's get real.
Is that not how you clean your laptop?
I mean, you could try it, but it probably wouldn't work.
You could douse it.
I mean, it's worth a try, isn't it?
just douse it in vodka.
Douse it in vodka.
It sounds like you would douse yourself in alcohol before getting the idea to do that.
It's just like, hey, Billy, why have you got a bottle of absinthe in your room? Oh, my laptop's a bit dirty.
Right, but so what do you guys think of Captain Morton, Matthew Good's character, who's also called the Shepherd? Like, do you think he was well developed enough, or could there have been more of him, or what do you guys think?
It's hard to say, because I don't think he did a bad job, but I just think he was so understated that he might as well have just not really been there, to be honest. I think his role could have been better served by being split up amongst other characters, but I mean, he didn't do a bad job. I can't really criticise him. He just did like a 5 out of 10 job, to be honest.
Oh, so he didn't do a good job?
You're saying that like I said he did a bad job. I'm just saying he didn't do anything particular.
Well, because the actor's last name is
shut
good.
Up. Just awful. That's just like weapons grade puns. No, look, his performance I couldn't pick out anything that was particularly bad with the performance. I just thought it was serviceable, and it just didn't do anything particularly noteworthy. And like the character had its uses in terms of story building, but I just felt that he was just kind of there.
That's fair. Yeah, because I feel like the other characters have more memorable moments, and then like after seeing the movie, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, he kind of felt like this film's equivalent of like, I don't know, what's the big blue bald guy from Power Rangers again?
Talking about the remake movie, that was horrible.
God, I don't even know what that was, but yeah, the big blue bald guy who guides the Power Rangers in the original series, he kind of felt like that, but somehow more inconsequential.
Yeah, I mean, because like the actor
Right.
appeared in Downton Abbey, which is like set in this sort of similar period in the same sort of area, like the aristocracy. But like his character in that was pretty low key, and so I think he really struggled to break out of that. And with all these other great actors around, his character definitely got pushed to the side of it.
Yeah, I get what you mean. We also have like Aaron Taylor Johnson, who played Kick-Ass himself. He plays Lee Unwin in this, who has like the same name as Eggsy's dad. So what'd you guys think of his performance and where they took his
It
character?
was pretty quick. Silver.
Oh,
Sorry.
goodness.
Shut up.
I thought you were gonna say quick.
I mean, if anyone's going to make terrible puns, you'd expect it to be Stephen. I just didn't expect that from Greg, so it caught me off guard.
Yeah, he was Quicksilver in Age
Yeah,
of
I know. That's why I said that was a terrible pun.
Yeah, I didn't see that pun coming.
Oh, yeah, he was also in Tenet, so he kind of had his thing going there.
Right. Yeah, Tenet was wild, but
Tenet was a trip and a half.
Oh, I really enjoyed that.
but yeah, like it kind of felt like they weren't making up. Like to me, this is what it felt like. It felt like they weren't making up their mind on whether this was an older relative of Eggsy or if his father was somehow super old and just ages better somehow, because there are all these implications, like similar lines and whatnot, and it's like, what's their intention with it? And that aspect was kind of confusing to me.
Yeah, it felt a bit like the end of Rise of Skywalker, when he had Lando and that woman, and like everyone was like, "Oh yeah, come on, there must have been his daughter or something or granddaughter," and then, but probably she's just a random person, and he just cares. So
Right, because I think in a visual dictionary or something, it says that Lando lost a daughter,
Yeah.
so it's like,
yeah, it's just like
they
yeah,
have similar experiences, and it's like, are they related, or is he
Yeah,
helping her? And it
yeah.
was confusing at the time.
yeah. That's what I got from Aaron's character, was that it wasn't flushed enough. Like it wasn't really there. He didn't really know. If they fleshed it out more, or they actually made it clear, it would have helped a lot better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of skipped past this part, but another montage I really liked was when they were like trying on the different outfits to see what would fit Conrad.
I liked how that. I mean, usually when films do that, then and it's kind of sort of like a like for like reference to something earlier in the series. I usually feel like it's kind of a sort of an overly cheesy sort of like dangling keys in front of the audience face to kind of get their attention, similar to the way that a lot of the story beats were represented in the fifth Terminator film. I just felt like they were just callbacks to like, hey, do you remember this thing earlier in the franchise? And I'm just like, yes, can I have more movie, please? So when I saw that coming in this film, I thought, oh God, please don't suck. But I weirdly enjoyed it. I didn't mind it so much in this case because it did feel like it tied in quite nicely to the sort of character building of Conrad, and it kind of, and usually I do have a bit of a negative view of prequels, but generally I think because this was a prequel and we were seeing the birth of the Kingsmen, that it felt like this was like the first time it was happening, so it felt like it had a bit more sort of like historical significance within the mythos and the internal sort of history of the franchise. So I honestly didn't mind it as much, and it was actually a pretty well presented scene, and it was quite subtly humorous. So I thought it was all right actually. Also, just pre-warning, I'm just going to open a can of Guinness if that's all right.
I've already had my Guinness for the night.
Here's my. Here I am opening a cold one with the boys.
I've not seen The Boys. But
me neither. Season 2's coming out.
It's incredible. I watched like the first half of the season, and it's just it's hilarious.
I mean, I've read the beginning of the comic series, and it's probably not for me. But like, I know lots of people are raving about it.
There's one scene in The Boys where one of the guys runs really quickly. He's basically like the Flash. And whenever he goes in...
Or like Quicksilver.
Yeah, and whenever he went into a supermarket, one scene, he literally went through someone. So they had to clean up after him.
Yeah, that's wild. Imagine someone running through you while you're just trying to get some crisps from the vending machine.
He was on the lower shelf as well. Just get pummeled.
It's just you're just like, ooh, cheese and onion flavoured frazzles, and then you just explode into a bag of meat.
I feel sorry for the person who's got to clear that up. The minimum wage person.
I'm just thinking back to when I worked at Waitrose. If that happened to me, I'd just be like, no, I'm just going to take some sushi and then head home. My shift ends in 5 minutes. This.
Yeah, dude. I didn't come to this job to clear it up.
No, I really didn't. In fact, I think that as much as I value that job, I think it ended up making me quite apathetic. Oh. I was going to laugh at that. I was just like, everyone was just silent, just like, okay, Ted, all right.
So your job there due to a sack.
Yeah.
You were a waiter waiting for people to laugh about. But yeah, I think as a prequel, like this, I feel like this could work as like an entry point for people, and like that's not something you would normally say about a prequel. And the director, Matthew Vaughn, not to confuse with Vince Vaughn, said that it felt more freeing to do a century beforehand without any of the familiar characters, more so than with X-Men First Class, where you still had like some of the familiar characters. And he did take some liberties with like the continuity, as pretty much every X-Men movie does, but it felt like there was still some beats that he felt like he had to stay in line with in that movie, whereas with the Kingsman, it felt like he was just having a really good time with all these different characters who could go anywhere.
Yeah, it still felt like a Kingsman film, despite being in the past.
Yeah, I think it was the right choice. I think had he tried to just continue the Eggsy character arc, I think it would have got more and more stuck in the mud. I think going back a century, you said, just gives him so many more degrees of movement. He can just put in completely new characters and just go back to its creative best, which he's shown that when he's allowed to be creative, he produces such incredible characters.
That's what I was thinking as well. I think there's still room for like the Kingsman franchise and series of films to expand, but I think that the character arc of Eggsy himself is probably complete. I mean, I'm not saying that you couldn't fit him into any more parts of the series. He could probably appear in like a couple of spin-offs and maybe like a TV short series and no any video games or whatever. But I think, yeah, his general spine of his character arc is done and dusted. So I was quite interested to see how they could expand the series. And I was a bit skeptical when I saw it was going to be a prequel. And the only prequels that I've ever really liked have been probably Puss in Boots and the sort of Star Wars prequel trilogy. But I'd say that this one definitely pleasantly surprised me. It sort of had a bunch of tropes of like prequels to have, but they didn't impact the story in negatively in the same way that a lot of equivalent story points and tropes do in other prequels. So I think generally they did the series proud by giving it a good basis, to sort of give a lot more stronger site foundation to, and I would agree that it's probably a good place to start off from if you're coming into the series fresh faced.
Yeah, so I guess we'll go around the horn or table or whatever and say what our favorite action sequence is. So mine was when Conrad rode a motorcycle up like on top of the castle and was just like firing at all his opponents. I thought that was like super. But let's see who wants to go first. What your favorite sequence was?
You can go first.
No, you go first.
Okay, so
for me, and this might seem a bit weird, but for me, my favorite action scene was nearer the beginning, which sort of showed the First World War fight scenes, and you just saw just how brutal it was. And I think a lot of World War One movies, they focus too much on trying to glorify it in a way, and I think this one just showed the pure brutality of just waves of soldiers being mowed down by machine guns, having absolutely no chance. And I mean, it probably wasn't the most fun for a lot of people, but for me, it just really I just really enjoyed the way it was portrayed. And it was quite different to a lot of other Kingsman fight scenes where generally you don't often see people you should be rooting for just getting absolutely destroyed. It's generally just one person kicking the ass out of a lot of other people.
Definitely a different tone from what you'd expect from other Kingsman sequences, but I thought it fit into this one pretty well. It was like surprisingly well. What about you, Ted? What was your favorite action sequence?
See, I thought it would have been the World War One scenes near the beginning for me as well. And I do really enjoy them because, and I would say, in respectfulness to James, I would say generally, like at least most World War One films do not present that conflict rather in a particularly positive light. It's just always referred to, I find, in a lot of media as like being a really futile and sort of like horrifying conflict for very little gain for either sides. But I kind of see what he's saying there. I think generally in terms of like thematics and setting, I'd say probably the World War One scenes at the beginning are my favourite. But I think in terms of just like how tense and like action packed it was, I'd say like the attempted assassination on the scene was also really. You knew it was coming, but it was still sort of very tense and very sort of like nail biting, and it just kept me on the edge of my seat a bit, which I really wasn't expecting. But I was quite pleasantly taken off guard, to be honest, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'd say probably that one for me.
After First Class, Matthew Vaughn wanted to do an X-Men movie where the JFK assassination was part of the plot in some way. So it's kind of like he got to like insert a different assassination plot in this one. So that's kind of weird.
X-Men Days of Future Past just stole that idea from him. But instead of having it, they just said, oh, by the way, he attempted to kill JFK.
Yeah, like Matthew Vaughn wanted to wait to do Days of Future Past. Like, I think he wanted it to be the third movie, but Fox and some other people wanted them to, like, do it sooner. So that's why Matthew Vaughn is like, or maybe it's like one of the reasons why he's like no longer the director on Days of Future Past, and then like he moved on and did the Kingsman movies, I guess. But I do kind of wonder how different that film series would have been if he had remained as a director. Like there's some things I enjoy about those later movies, but I feel like Vaughn might have possibly had like a better or more cohesive singular vision that he could have like executed if he remained
definitely.
in
Like
charge.
if you look at the recent Star Wars movies, the biggest problem they had was changing their director. Like changing from J.J. Abrams straight to Rian Johnson just immediately made sure that they were just two completely different directors with two different viewpoints, and it made that sort of series of movies just very unlike each other, and you just and it definitely struggled to produce a cohesive story. And I think definitely X-Men also, because once again, like you said, you had a bunch of directors all with different opinions. I sort of feel that with a film series, unless it goes on for ages, you should be looking to keep the same director just for the cohesiveness.
Right, or just like at the beginning of like the series or trilogy or whatever, just sit the people together and have them all agree on what the singular story is, and to not try to like undo what the other person did. Just have a plan,
like Marvel does.
Like, right. Yeah, because I'm sure Marvel doesn't always plan everything, but it feels like they plan everything, and that's just
I believe they have one guy whose main job is to keep the continuity going. So I think
I think
so. Yeah, script is checked through and made sure that they're not changing some character massively, or if they're saying, actually, you know what, this isn't the general plan we're going towards, we need you to change this. And that's just been such a strength of that series, that every single movie feels part of that universe. It doesn't feel like, oh wait, this character has now completely changed their motives from the previous movie.
Right, and every once in a while they do explain a little thing that doesn't really fit, like the ending of The Incredible Hulk, they explained with a Marvel one-shot to make it fit in the like timeline more, and like the whole thing of like the Infinity Gauntlet being in that vault on Asgard in the first Thor movie, like people noticed that, and then in Ragnarok they explain, oh, that one was a replica. It was like,
indeed, that was such a great and clever move, because everyone was saying, and they were like, yeah, it's a fake prop.
Yeah, because beforehand people were speculating that, oh, there are two Infinity Gauntlets and they'll both come into play.
Yeah,
it's like, no,
such a clever and witty way of dealing with it, I felt.
All right. So, okay. Did everyone say their favorite?
I think Greg's missing.
Or is there one person?
I think Greg's.
Yeah, I didn't say my.
Okay, Greg. Now's your time to shine, Greggy boy.
I thought Greg said septic for a second, and I was just like, what?
Well, let's go to my septic tank.
Because that boy is bursting to the seams.
Well, my favourite set piece was near the end, where you had the ensemble cast all on horseback, charging towards Rasputin and Craig.
Yeah, Craig was a weird name for an in this movie.
And then they had the morning stars in hand, just like clobbering all the enemies left, right, and center, and it was just heads flying, arms being torn off. Oh, it was just.
There was that really weird bit where it kind of like was sort of kind of the tongue-in-cheek reference to Machete, where like one guy got his like guts pulled out, and then like it got used as a rope by another character to take on the villains, and it was like, oh, that's pretty hardcore. It was just, I mean, stuff like that kind of did feel a bit out of theme for what the film was going for, but it was quite funny at the same time, to be honest.
Well, hey, they have to show the atrocities of this war, right?
I mean, World War I is kind of a synonym for pointless warfare, really, so I don't think they needed to. Let's be perfectly honest. It was just 50 million men and women dying for pretty much no reason.
A family squabble.
Yeah, it's just like, you took the apple pie. No, you did. I'm going to invade Serbia. That's basically what it boiled down to, let's be honest.
Indeed.
It's the most hodgepodge, inaccurate description of the First World War possible.
Horrible histories did a better job of explaining.
Yeah, a
Could've
rusty
fooled
old
me.
DVD of horrible histories would have done a better job, to be honest.
The Great War, more like the not so great war.
Rubbish. That was shit.
Yes, everything, Stephen.
Right, but yeah, like the sword fight with Rasputin and like the use of the Morning Star was like probably one of the more memorable moments, and it seemed like they really did take the time to train for all this stuff, and I think that really adds more believability to all this as over the top.
Yeah, indeed, because the Morning Star is just a very... It's an awesome weapon, but it's a very difficult weapon to use because you're swinging around a massive ball on a chain. And I think the way they went about it made it so much more useful. And like, it wasn't just swinging wildly out of control. All the movements were just so perfect. It just looked wonderful.
Yeah, and what do you guys think of the parachute scene?
That was hilarious.
Yeah, I loved it when they were floating down, and then Polly, as she is, she just decided to slice Conrad's parachute and just saw him drop, and I was like, yo, is that really necessary?
It's like, yeah, her character turn towards the end of the film at that point was just really strange. It kind of just came out of nowhere, and like, it felt like you could kind of expect it, but at the same time, it just wasn't needed, and it kind of spoiled what was otherwise a really enjoyable character. I enjoyed it like Greg did, but it was just like, it just felt weirdly out of place for some reason.
Yeah, and it took Conrad quite a while to recover from that, both physically and just emotionally, like being betrayed by someone who's like close.
I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I'm not saying stuff like that has to be set up like from a mile away, but it just didn't feel very well set up at all. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's sort of like surprise, but I'm evil now.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt a bit unnecessary because the character didn't really get out too much later in the movie anyway, so it just felt like a hodgepodge. It's like, yeah, let's make her the villain, and just like, didn't really need that.
No, not at all.
So with all that being said, what do you guys think of the final confrontation between like Conrad and Polly towards the end?
Weirdly enough, it felt like the final confrontation from the good, the bad, and the ugly. It felt very sort of like stone cold and sort of like eye to eye in the death of the pale blue moonlight. It just felt really... It was strange because it felt like, despite my misgivings with like the weird character turns towards the end of the film, it felt like it was a satisfying resolution to that particular strata of the characters' arcs. And while I feel like they could have gotten to that point in a much more satisfying and narratively construcive way, I feel like that, as far as like pinpoint conclusions go, they could have done a hell of a lot worse. So yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're... I don't even know what the words are.
We're going for...
It's because my vocabulary is too far beyond your feeble American comprehension.
Yeah,
it's just like I'm using all these big boy words, and meanwhile you're just like, me likey burger.
Hey man, I'm the type of person who will say like and suppose in a sentence. Okay.
Suppose, like
I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, God, you really are from Florida.
I'm from California.
Same thing, whatever.
But yeah, so we get like the final fight scene, and they kind of wrap it up really neatly despite all the chaos and violence, and then follow it up with this salmon for breakfast type of scene. Just like, you know, the remaining hero characters just having a chat and whatnot.
I mean, they should have had them
fish fingers for breakfast, you savage.
For goodness sake, I mean, I think it's meant to be going...
Have you not seen Doctor Who?
Loving Doctor Who.
Sorry, I feel like if you'd made me breakfast, it would be something like deep fried beef burgers or some bonkers stuff like that.
I mean, I'd have that for
No,
breakfast.
stop! Don't encourage him. No,
You could have any meal for breakfast, really.
yeah, no,
You
you
could have
couldn't.
any
You're not going to have
meal
something like
for
moussaka for
breakfast,
breakfast
really.
because that would be too rich for the morning. Like, and
You're telling me that
God,
you've
what is
never
wrong
had
with you?
Funyuns for breakfast?
I do like
Hello,
Funyuns. I
Funyuns.
just don't have them for breakfast because I'm not a base savage like you lot.
I mean, if
What
I
are
was
they?
fitter and richer, I'd have like good breakfasts for breakfast.
Yeah,
because they're
I
like
think
gorgeous.
in an ideal world, I'd actually really like to have miso soup and sushi for breakfast every day, but I'm not. Yeah, just
Oh, that sounds good. Well, maybe not every day for me, but like every.
oh no.
Well, maybe not.
For me,
not
it would
every
be.
day
For me, it would
me,
be
but,
because I
like,
love
every-
miso soup and sushi.
Yeah.
It's just like so light and like strangely refreshing, and it's just it just hits all the beats for me.
But yeah, going back to the original question,
Yeah.
I felt that it was sort of nice because at the same time, I think one of the most important things about this movie was reminding you that this was mainly about sort of the aristocracy and sort of them. And I think the salmon for breakfast was a great way of reminding you that this is just sort of sort of making you once again remember that these are rich people, and had they just had like soldiers and boiled eggs and soldiers, it would have been a bit more forgotten.
Right. And during their conversation in this scene, we get like, I guess the final bow on top of the present of just like, Conrad and his dad talking to each other about how proud they are of each other. It's like, the typical father-son, I'm proud of you thing. And I thought it was a pleasant way
I mean, there was
the
like,
movie, I guess.
It was strange because I felt like they could have probably done that scene in a more they could have probably filled out that scene in a more emotionally comprehensive way. But I thought for the purpose it was serving, it did a perfectly fine job that I can't really fault. So I didn't really have any actual major problems with it. It was a bit basic, but it was like, I mean, it's like when you're in the mood for like. I mean, it's like when you're in the mood for a hot dog, so you just make a really basic one with like basic like mustard hot dogs and buns from the supermarket. It's not going to be anything great, but it's like because it's specifically what you want, you know what you're getting, and you don't mind that it's perhaps not the greatest thing that you could have gotten in that category. And I feel like that same way about that scene. It's like I've seen better examples of it, but for what it was, it served the purpose that it served perfectly fine.
Yeah, who needs toasted bread when you can just put hot dog buns in the microwave?
Even
every time I talk to you guys about cooking, it just gives me post-depression. It's like microwave hot dogs, burgers for breakfast.
Hot dog buns by themselves,
That's
not
even
hot
worse.
dogs.
That makes it soggy and hard.
I don't actually do that. I
hope not.
But I just thought this. But yeah, but before we go into final thoughts, what'd you all think of the music?
Wasn't anything like I hadn't heard before, but it served the purpose quite well, and it set the scene well. I think I'd rate the music like a 6 out of 10 because it was like nothing really. They didn't try to do anything intelligent with the music, but like the purpose it served in each scene was fine enough.
Yeah, and what were you saying, Greg?
I felt it's quite gritty, like it helped the action scenes in that kind of sense, because like obviously it's a world war, if there is going to be violence, and I just felt that like some of the music went well with like the action scenes, like it was all timed, and yeah.
I did think that the music during the part where like Craig had his head shot off was pretty epic, but other than that, I don't remember much of the music. I'd have to go and listen to it again. Also interesting choice having Stanley Tucci play Craig, and you also had these other actors playing random soldiers and these blink and you'll miss them cameos.
Yeah, Stanley Tucci really stood out there. Like, you wouldn't think that he would have played such a good Craig, but I think Craig was written so well for him that he made it his own.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I guess with that we could go into final thoughts and score out of 10. And we haven't normally done this, but I kind of think it'd be fun to start like doing this. For unit of measurement, like the number out of 10, you can say like an object related to the movie or whatever. So like, for example, for, I don't know, like Star Wars, you might say, oh, that was like 6 out of 10 lightsabers, or 7 out of 10 planets. I don't know. You can just, like, the world is your treasure.
Oyster. It's oyster, bro.
For unit. I was gonna say that, but I decided
It was not good.
It doesn't, for me, I feel like the film is it's definitely above average. It's one of the better prequels out there, despite my misgivings about prequels, not just in terms of their general quality, but also the concept of them universally. And I feel like while there were certain aspects I think could have used significant improvement, that combined together, all the different aspects of the film created something that was much greater than the sum of its parts, and they all complemented each other quite well to perhaps cover up for each of the aspects of the film's misgivings and sort of shortcomings as well. So I'd say it's probably like 7 out of 10. It's probably like somewhere between a 6.5 and a 7 out of 10. Sorry, or as I should say, 6.5 sword canes out of 10.
Nice.
Better than the second movie, but still didn't quite get the sparkle of the original Kingsman movie. But at the same time, I don't think it was looking to, because I think he understands by this point that he just can't. Still a very enjoyable movie, a great introduction to the Kingsman series. I would probably give it 6.5 out of 10 parachutes.
And those parachutes
they just explode
or get splashed.
I feel that it did its purpose as a prequel, and like I can see them carrying on Conrad's story. So I'm going to give this movie a 7 Craigs.
So yeah,
7 out of 10 Craigs.
Okay. Yeah, and before I say my score, that was another thing I want to ask you guys about was, would you rather the next Kingsman movie continue from this or from like Golden Circle?
I would love to see
the
how they deal with the Second World War, because the reason why the First World War brought in Kingsman was obviously because so many of the aristocracy lost their family to it. So the Second World War, do they consider that a failure, or do they say, well, it didn't devastate us the same way that the First World War did? How did they try and stop it? Was there any subterfuge? I think it'd be really interesting to look at some of the different politics behind it. I feel like you'd get a really interesting debate going.
Right, because both wars are terrible, but you could definitely play with the themes of like how would different people of different classes like react to it.
I get what James is saying, but I just feel like 3 for this series. 3 just feels like the magic number. I feel like if there's going to be any more media from it, I feel like I'd rather have it just be shorts or something focused on like singular missions. So generally, I'd say I'm happy with the series where it is. I don't mind them expanding it in small increments, but for like feature-length films, I think I'm satisfied with what we've got.
I feel like, yes, Conrad's story had an ending with his father, and in that sense, but like I would like to see what more he can do. I'd like to see him grow even further. Like, because the interwar periods, like it was quite messy.
I do kind of feel like they could just end it here, but if they had to do another movie, I would say follow Conrad, and because just in my head, it's kind of weird that there are 2 Eggsy movies and 1 Conrad movie, and it's like I'd kind of want it to be equal if they do. continue, but I don't know what the current plans are. But my score for this movie, so I agree that it was better than the second one, but not as good as the first one. Like, at best, I'd probably give the first movie, like, maybe, let's see, would I give it a 9 or 8.5? It's, like, somewhere around there, and Golden Circle would be, like, a 7 for me. Like, I know my scale was kind of different, I guess. But The Kingsman, I feel like I enjoyed it around how much I enjoyed the first Wonder Woman movie, which was like another World War I movie. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10 Morning Stars.
Nice. I mean, they are thinking of doing Statesman, though. I've heard rumours of Statesman, the American version of the Kingsman.
Oh. I mean, would that work as well?
Stop! Don't give them ideas. Just.
I mean, but yeah, like, I mean, the Statesman, like, they were a fun idea, but I just feel like Kingsman, the idea of the British stereotype is just so much more fun to deal with than the American stereotype, which is literally we just.
I mean, it was basically written for Channing Tatum, so.
Yeah, indeed, he played so well in it. Like, if they're going to do a film about Statesman, they need some more.
I think it's going to be a Magic Mike prequel.
Oh yes, I see that.
I feel like you guys are searching for a much different film than what we're thinking of. But I mean, hey, if that's your shindig, then go for it.
Shindig. Oh, all right, and yeah, I guess we did it, boys. We season 2 of Delayed Replay has started and is in the can. Season 3 next week. No, it just started. But yeah, so like lots of stuff, more movies planned for this season. In the immediate future, I've got the schedule in front of me. It'll kind of be a mix between like stuff that came out toward the end of last year and stuff that's newer. So next will be the 355, which is an American spy movie that just came out. And that one was actually like from Simon Kinberg, who wrote and directed Dark Phoenix and also co-wrote X-Men The Last Stand. So another weird X-Men connection there. And then Coming to America, which came out toward the end of last year. Then Marvel's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, that'll be new. Live-action Tom and Jerry movie that came out toward the end of last year. And Old, which will be new, weirdly enough. And then Godzilla vs. Kong, which was last year. So yeah, some cool stuff to talk about in upcoming episodes. Thanks for joining me on this one, guys. I guess we'll go one by one. Ted, thanks for joining. Where can people find your stuff?
I have a very old platform that I'm infrequently updating on Blogger, where I go under the pseudonym The Crazed Critic. The name of my blog on there is Havin a Mare, so Havina, a mare. And basically on there I do sort of like written film reviews, recipe posts and stuff like that. And then on YouTube I'm under either Gitbag the Great, where I do gaming videos and the occasional sort of podcasts on popular culture and video games, and Ted's Booze Cellar, where I review a wide range of food, alcohol, and other sort of different assorted products. So if people are interested in that sort of thing, then by all means follow me on those platforms there. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Great to have you. And I'll, of course, put the links in the show notes for this episode. Greg, thanks for joining. Where can people find the Society?
So the Society has a Discord, which I think anyone can join, really. Yeah, there's a Facebook group. But yeah, you should just search up University of Sussex, Sci-Fi and Horror. Right? You will find our Facebook page, and then the Discord link is on there. So we'd be happy to have you join. Yeah,
it's always fun, like talking movies over there. And James, thanks for joining as well. I don't know if you have anything to plug.
Just insert in like a 15-second advert about hot dogs or something.
This episode is sponsored by Burger King. Be a Burger King's man.
How about enjoy the taste of McDonald's? The gorgeous taste of the Big Mac is a wonderful way to start the day.
Also, you know what was like unintentional that happened? Like, we recorded this in Martin Luther King Jr. weekend. That was a weird coincidence.
How so?
Because, you know, it's Kingsman for this episode. Yeah, and yesterday was MLK Jr.'s birthday, but like over here, like Monday is what's technically people have that Monday off. So with that, if you would like to email the podcast with your thoughts on movies that have been talked about here, or maybe you want to talk about how movies ended up being like in your universe, you know, differences, similarities, whatnot, you can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. As for my own stuff, you can find my novel, Lemons Loom Like Rain. It is available on Amazon. Go to stevenschinder.com for more info on that. I am also on another podcast called Star Trek Culture. We finished Star Trek Discovery Season 3 recently and are doing a rewatch of the original series, as well as reporting the Star Trek news every now and then. You can find that over at the YouTube channel Culture Slate. I'm also writing and editing for them, so cultureslate.com is where you can find some stuff. And you can follow me at Steven Schinder on Twitter and Instagram, and Steven Schinder Storytelling on Facebook. And yeah, I think that's everything. If I forgot something, I'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, thanks you guys for joining me on this one.
And
without further delay, have a good day.
And a good time.